Every automaker that went bankrupt explained. Studebaker, 1963. Studebaker was making cars since 1902. They survived 2 world wars, the Depression, everything. But by the 1950s, they were bleeding cash. Their cars looked weird compared to the big 3, and dealers didn't want to sell them. They merged with Packard in 1954, which was like 2 drowning people grabbing each other. The real killer? They couldn't compete on price. GM and Ford were pumping out cheaper cars because of their massive scale. Studebaker's last attempt was moving production to Canada and making the Lark, a compact that actually sold okay for a minute, but it wasn't enough. They stopped making cars in 1963 and fully shut down in 1966. Packard, 1958. Packard used to be the luxury brand. Presidents drove Packards, but after World War II, they got demolished. They tried going mass market to compete with Cadillac, which backfired because nobody wanted a common Packard. That Studebaker merger? Disaster. Studebaker was in worse shape than anyone knew. By 1956, Packard was just rebadging Studebakers with different grills. The 1958 Packard Hawk was literally a Studebaker with Packard badges. That was it. The brand died because they lost their identity and couldn't figure out what they wanted to be. Tucker, 1948. Preston Tucker wanted to build the car of the future. The Tucker 48 had a rear engine, disc brakes, a safety cage, a third headlight that turned with the steering wheel. This thing was genuinely ahead of its time. Tucker raised $26 million by pre-selling dealer franchises and accessories before he even built a single car. The problem? The SEC came after him for fraud, saying he was taking people's money with no real plan to build cars. Tucker fought the charges and won, but the damage was done. Investors bailed. They only made 51 cars before shutting down in 1948. Some people think the big 3 had him killed off because he was a threat. Maybe. Or maybe he was just underfunded and in over his head. DeLorean, 1982. John DeLorean left a VP job at GM to build his dream car, the DMC-12 with those gull-wing doors and stainless steel body. It looked unbelievable, but it was slow, expensive, and built in a factory in Northern Ireland that had 0 car-making experience. The British government gave DeLorean $120 million to build the factory and create jobs. The cars had quality problems from day one. Then, in 1982, DeLorean got busted in an FBI sting trying to buy cocaine to save the company. He claimed entrapment and beat the charges, but DeLorean Motor Company was finished. They made about 9,000 cars. Back to the Future saved the car's legacy, but it couldn't save the company. Saab, 2011. Saab was quirky. Engineers ran the company, not accountants. They put the ignition between the seats, made the cars handle like rally cars, and built them tough as hell. GM bought half of Saab in 1989 and the rest in 2000, then proceeded to ruin everything people loved about the brand. GM made Saab share platforms with Chevys and Subarus. The 97X was a Chevy Trailblazer with a Saab badge. When GM went bankrupt in 2009, they tried to sell Saab but couldn't find a buyer. A Dutch company called Spyker bought it for $74 million in 2010. They lasted 1 year. Saab couldn't get parts, couldn't pay workers, couldn't sell enough cars. Done by 2011. Saturn, 2009. GM created Saturn in 1985 to compete with Japanese imports. The idea was different everything. Different factories, different dealer experience, different labor agreements. No haggle pricing. The cars were plastic-bodied and actually pretty reliable. Saturn was selling 286,000 cars a year in 1994. But GM got greedy. They stopped investing in new models. The View and Ion were boring compared to Hondas and Toyotas. By the 2000s, Saturn was just selling rebadged Opels and Chevys. When GM went bankrupt in 2009, Saturn got axed. Penske almost bought it, but backed out. 24 years of trying to be different, killed off in the bankruptcy. Pontiac, 2010. Pontiac was GM's performance brand. GTO, Firebird, Trans Am. They made legitimate muscle cars. But by the 2000s, Pontiac was slapping fake hood scoops on front-wheel drive Chevy platforms. The G6 was a boring sedan. The Aztek looked like it was designed by a focus group having a panic attack. GM kept the brand alive with the G8 and Solstice, which were actually good, but it was too late. When the government bailed out GM in 2009, they forced them to kill brands. Pontiac died in 2010. 84 years gone because GM forgot what made it special. Hummer, 2010. Hummer started as a military vehicle. Then Arnold Schwarzenegger convinced AM General to make a civilian version. GM bought the brand in 1999. The H1 got 10 miles per gallon and cost $140,000. The H2 and H3 were based on Chevy trucks and still sucked down gas. When gas hit $4 a gallon in 2008, Hummer was dead. Nobody wanted a 5-ton status symbol anymore. GM tried selling it to a Chinese company, but the deal fell through. The brand shut down in 2010. Now GM's bringing it back as an electric truck, which is wild considering what killed it the first time. Oldsmobile, 2004. Oldsmobile was America's oldest car brand, started in 1897. They built the Cutlass, the 442, the Toronado with front-wheel drive, and a 455 V8. But by the 1990s, nobody could tell an Oldsmobile from a Buick or Pontiac. Same platforms, same engines, just different badges. "This is not your father's Oldsmobile," was their slogan, which basically told their actual customers to get lost. Sales tanked. GM announced in 2000 they were killing the brand, then spent 4 years phasing it out. The last Olds rolled off the line in 2004, 107 years. Finished because GM couldn't figure out what an Oldsmobile was supposed to be. Fisker, 2013. Henrik Fisker designed the Aston Martin DB9 and BMW Z8, then started Fisker Automotive to build luxury hybrids. The Karma looked incredible. Leonardo DiCaprio and Justin Bieber bought them. But the cars had problems. Batteries caught fire. They got terrible reviews. Then, Hurricane Sandy destroyed $30 million worth of Karmas sitting at a port in New Jersey. Their battery supplier, A123, went bankrupt. The Department of Energy gave them a $529 million loan, then froze it after they only took $192 million. Fisker went bankrupt in 2013. A Chinese company bought the remains. Henrik Fisker started a new company also called Fisker, which also went bankrupt in 2024. Same guy, same result, twice. Mitsubishi Motors, US exit, 2021. Mitsubishi in the US was dying for years. They peaked in 2002 with the Lancer, Eclipse, and Montero. Then they started the zero down, zero interest, zero payments for a year program. Sounds great, except they were giving loans to anyone with a pulse. Their default rate hit 7%. They lost billions. The cars got boring. The Eclipse turned into a crossover, which pissed everyone off. By 2021, they were only selling 95,000 cars a year in the US. They didn't technically go bankrupt, but they shut down their US headquarters and fired everyone. Now they just import whatever Nissan tells them to, because Nissan owns a chunk of them. The car business is brutal. You need billions in capital, years of development time, dealer networks, and you're competing against companies that have been doing this for a century. One bad model, one recession, one CEO who doesn't understand the brand, and you're done. These companies all thought they'd last forever. None of them did.